Any
Perfect.
no?
That gives me just enough opportunity to take these cupcakes out of the oven. So
So
turn
I'm
my
gonna
camera
do
off for
that
like
too.
2 seconds.
Okay, Olivia says that she is coming in, and hello everyone who's waiting who's an attendee. We'll get started in just a moment. Hello, I was muted. I'll start again. I'm playing two roles today. I'm both the poet laureate to welcome you to the festival, and I'm also the moderator of this panel. So I'm going to start with my first role. Welcome to the Utah Poetry Festival. This is a panel called Forming and Sustaining Poetry Communities, and I'm the moderator, and I'm also the poet laureate of Utah, Lisa Bickmore. This festival began as an initiative of my predecessor, Paisley Rekdal, during her tenure as poet laureate of the state. I'm very proud to be able to continue it. I also just want to note with emphasis that the festival would not be possible without the support, both logistical and financial, of Utah Humanities and the Division of Arts and Museums. Today, Case Johnston is facilitating the Zoom. Thank you so much, Case. As you know, the institutions that support and promote the arts and the humanities in our state and nationally are under severe strain and attack. So I urge you, as a citizen and as a lover and supporter of the literary and other arts, to contact your elected officials to tell them why experiences like this are important to you. I also want to thank Nano Taggart, Lara Stott, Maureen Clark, and Melissa Salguero for their work in planning this festival. The lively panels that have been happening today, and there will be another one after this one, came about through their efforts, their intelligence, and their invention. A couple of housekeeping details. Your video and microphone are muted for the webinar, but you are able to ask questions of our panelists. You can do this by posting your questions in the Q&A. We'll try to save a little time at the end for the panelists to answer those questions. And please check out the virtual book fair and reading room at the festival website. Books and other materials by all our participants are available there for you to peruse and purchase. Finally, I want to thank you, the attendees, for being here. Thank you for being a vital part of the literary ecosystem of our state by making time for and showing up for poetry. Okay, now I'm switching to my role as the moderator of this panel. Hello, I'm your moderator. I'm going to introduce all of our panelists first, and then we'll start by talking a little bit about experiences with community organizing around poetry. We'll be able to share in the sort of really rich set of experiences and kinds of organizations that all our panelists have been a part of and have been instigators of. So I'm going to start with Marilyn Melissa Salguero. She, her, hers, ella, is a Guatemalan poet who puts the salt in Salt Lake City, Utah. She's the human equivalent of red wine, crushed velvet, and using humor as a poor coping mechanism. Her work centers on her life, relationships, and identity. She's been featured in multiple publications, including Right About Now Poetry, Ink and Nebula, Rising Phoenix Press, and Crape and Pen. She was a 2020 nominee for the Pushcart Prize in Poetry and a recipient of the Academy of American Poets Student Contest for 2020. When not yelling about white boys or making God metaphors, Melissa can be found feeding her online shopping addiction, releasing a self-published chapbook entitled Cannibal in 2022. I think I skipped a line. Ugh. Her work, along with her emotional overflow, can be found on Instagram. Lara Ruiz, ella, is a Mexican bilingual poet, and I saw her say that she was trilingual, translator and interpreter. She's the mother of two beautiful Chicano boys. Her works have been published in Unmute magazine in San Francisco, the French editorial short edition, as well as Consecrate, Desecrate, an anthology to save our Great Salt Lake. She published her first book in Spanish in 2022, Inventario de mis Musas. In her few time, she likes to play guitar, bike, and run to help her mind create more universes and muses. Olivia Dudding Rodriguez is an Appalachian-grown poet, storyteller, facilitator, and devoted celebrant who has made her home in eastern Utah. Born and raised in southeastern Ohio, her work centers the stories, identities, and inheritances of rural places. She is a fellow and alumnus and resident of the Heart of It, a writing retreat founded by poet Desiree Dalla Giacomo. Olivia has written in community with River Writers led by Nan Seymour in Salt Lake City and among the Book Cliff Writers hosted by Nancy Takis in Price, Utah. She is the Poet Laureate of Helper, Utah, and her first chapbook, Honey Wonder, arrived in July 2024 from Moon in the Rye Press. And finally, but not least, Patrick Ramsey is a queer Utah-based poet who was raised in and along the wetlands of the shrinking Great Salt Lake. He earned his BA in English and creative writing at Weber State University, where he served as editor-in-chief of Metaphor Literary Journal. His poems focus on the confluence of land, queerness, and community in the West. His work has appeared in Guarlingo, on NPR, 15 Bites, West Trade Review, and more. You can find more of his work in his chapbook, Butterflies Are Rare in Beehives, at patrickramseypoet.com or on Instagram at WritePatrick. Okay, this is a fantastic panel, and I have been so excited to get to hear what you have to say about your experiences and to help us understand more about forming and sustaining poetry communities. So I'd like to just start by having you tell us a little bit about poetry communities that you have been a part of and poetry communities that you have been an instigator or creator of. And any one of you could start. I'd be glad to have anyone.
I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, for having me, and thank you, Utah Humanities, for facilitating experiences like these. So I started writing poetry in college, and I've pretty much sought out community at every step. I think we have this great illusion that writing poetry has to be a solitary act, that it's something that you do at a typewriter with a bottle of whiskey next to you, and it has to be this like soul-wrenching thing, but it doesn't have to be like that. There are plenty of people in your community right now who are writing and also would like other writers in their writing practice near them. So I, in college, joined Metaphor, the literary journal. So if you're a part of a university, I would say look to your English department or your humanities college. There are usually either clubs or specific things like literary journals, or even like the newspaper that have opportunities for writers to gather. And then after I graduated, it became more of an effort. Like you have to go and seek things out after you leave that infrastructure where someone else is organizing in your college, and it's just optional. You can just show up. It's like great to have that, but then you enter the real world and you have to go seek it out. So I've been part of paid writing workshops and like attended paid writing workshops and met some writing mentors that way. And then eventually opened my own bookstore briefly in Ogden, where I had the opportunity to program a space. And that's where my current writing community really blossomed. And I operate a writing workshop on a weekly basis called Write Club, and that's where we get together, talk about a poem. I offer a prompt, we write for 40 minutes, and then we discuss for 45 to 60 minutes. And it's just a consistent weekly thing. It's free, and that's really been a foothold for my writing practice. But yeah, that's kind of a overview of how I got into the writing community. But yeah, we don't have to do it alone.
Thank you, Patrick.
I'll jump in. So my name is Melissa Salguero. I am a slam poet, mostly from South Side, so Salt Lake City, Utah, West Valley, Kearns area. I got in through kind of the more like academic route. So I came in through my college's slam team over at Westminster. Originally it was a club, and then someone was like, "Oh no, there's actual like slams happening," and I was like, "Oh, that seems fun." And I went, and it was just an electrifying energy. And I was like, I like that. Let's keep yelling about our feelings, but like together and get judged about it. And so started doing that. So I transitioned from like the Westminster Slam scene to the more larger Utah like slam scene. And then that led into the more like national pipeline of like the collegiate circle and then the national circle. And so I've been running around the country for since I was like probably 19, competing and doing slams, etc., all over. And then in 2020, when COVID-19 first reared its ugly head, and the world was shut down, the slam community specifically, because it is mostly in person, it really kind of died off a little bit. And so one of the other elders in the slam community named Willie Palomo, who most of you are familiar with, was like, okay, well, let's start doing things in isolation. So we started with Zoom meetings. And then when vaccines came out, we started meeting with a group of other Latinx writers. Laura was also part of that too. And we started Plumas Colectiva, which is a Latinx group that celebrates writers and art. And so after 2021, we started hosting BIPOC mics, dances, and just other like social and community events with less of a focus specifically on slam and more on just writing and literary art and art in general. And our next project that we're currently working on is called like Slam Quetzal. And it is specifically it is an bilingual slam that is international. And so we have a host of a Latinx artist that usually is from like another country, and it's open everywhere because it's on Zoom. And we go through and we host virtual slams. And so we've done one so far. We're hoping to have another one in the next month or so. And so, yeah, my little, I guess, specialty is like both offline and online communities and shifting landscapes.
Thank you, Melissa. How about you, Olivia?
I just had my finger on the unmute button. I was just about to hop in. Hello, I'm Olivia Dudding Rodriguez. I'm coming to you from my front porch, and what a really rich group this is. It's been so delightful to hear these various schools of community that you've come from. I have had the privilege of being a community taught poet, and I will say that the kitchen tables that I have been able to learn poetry from have been surprising ones. I moved to Salt Lake City in 2014 and was gifted a class to Nan Seymour's workshop, which was really transformational. And then a few years later, I got brave enough to apply for the Heart of It, which is a writing retreat that is geared for working class poets mostly. And I was surprised when I was accepted. And what I can tell you about being a community taught poet is that there is no other gift than being able to write next to someone and being reflected to yourself and learning how to listen. I think that of all the work that a community can teach you about writing, it is mostly about listening. And I had even extra luck when I moved to Carbon County in 2017 to meet Nancy Takis, who is an incredible poet. And again, I was invited to a table at a senior center in Price, Utah. And what I also want to say is I think there's evidence that there are incredible writers who are willing to write with you anywhere. I mean, if I can find people to write with in Price, Utah, they're everywhere. So that is my lineage of who I come from. I come from generous people who have been willing to put a seat next to them at a table. And I really believe that the self-knowledge can provide access for a community to know itself differently. So that's what I'll say about me. I am now the Poet Laureate of Helper, Utah, which is the truest delight, I have to say. We're a very small town, but we've got a lot to say. And yeah, thank you for having me, Lisa.
Delighted. Laura, how about you?
Laura Ruiz. I apologize in advance. I'm in an open area. I just finished running a race and I did not make it on time to my apartment. So I'm Laura Ruiz. I was born in Mexico. I started writing poetry when I migrated to the US. I started writing in Spanish and then in English, and then just mixing them both. My roots are from the Nahua people who are from Puebla, where my parents were born. So I've been trying to learn our language because it got lost over the generations in their family. I have had the privilege to be part of Artes de Mexico Writers Group, Plumas Colectiva. I'm active with Plumas Colectiva, and I call myself an adoptee from Spoken Views Collective, which is here in Reno, with Jesse James Sigler, who's now the Poet Laureate of Reno, and Ian Watson, too, who's the one that started all of that. I'm also part of a collective here called Latino Arte and Culture, and they hold a Spanish Poetry Festival every year. And I have my book. I started doing zines now. And poetry's just been liberating. It's been a place where I can place my anger in a healthy way. The first time that I ever did slam poetry was actually with Plumas Colectiva. They had it was like a contest for Valentine's Day, and I didn't do bad. And then I thought, well, maybe I can do it too, and I was able to be a part of Plumas Colectiva now. So I'm so happy to be here today and excited to talk to everybody about this. Thank you, Lisa.
I'm so happy you're all here. I just really could not even wait to get to hear from you. So I'm going to ask another question, partly because I think drawing from your experience, but also like looking at it through the lens of somebody asking you about it can maybe help give our audience, our attendees, some ideas about how to strengthen their own poetry communities, or where they feel separate from poetry communities, how to find one. So the next question I want to ask you is, you've all sort of addressed the question of what the benefits of belonging to or participating in a poetry community. You already sort of mentioned that, but I want to ask you, what are some of the concrete actions that you, as a builder of poetry communities, have undertaken, whatever that is? When I asked you, I said, is it setting up chairs or setting up a Zoom, or, and that's part of it. But I think there are also some other things that we do that help us sustain it, that from beyond setting up a meeting, as you all have taken part in that, to helping to keep, a vibe or a sort of ethos of your community going, that makes people want to come back and makes people want to invest their time, energy, and so forth into it. So could you talk a little bit about that? What actions or concrete things have you done that help to sustain the poetry communities that either you're building or you're a part of?
I'll jump in. I feel like speaking to Olivia's point and Patrick's point about like not just only creating actual spaces, but really being annoying is how I'm gonna phrase that. Being persistent in the way that we follow up with people. Because if we want to build community, part of that is also making sure that people feel like there is always a place for them in community. And, you know, schedules shift or energy shift. And so part of that is also meeting people where they're at, wherever that level of participation is, and letting them know, like, hey, we see you. You are still valued here. And like, there is a place for you in whatever capacity you have, whether that be, oh, you only have time to show up on, you know, a third Zoom meeting every fourth Sunday. And you're gonna stay for 10 minutes. Great, love that. If you never want to share, that's perfect. If you only want to come for like the writing work portion of it, that's fine. But also offering different touch points. Like something that we do with Plumas is we have our slams, but it's not just, or like our writing workshops, and it's not just that. We show up at other places and we're like, hey, we're gonna
Yes.
go do other social events. Like we went to a pumpkin patch for like Halloween just for funsies because we wanted to build those relationships because we can't ask, like the art asks us to be vulnerable, and we cannot have vulnerability with others if we are not willing to build a space in which others can be vulnerable.
I
I'll
mean,
jump in. Oh, I'm sorry,
go
Olivia.
for it. No, you got it, Laura.
So sorry. One thing that I do want to point out, I know this panel is in English, but language accessibility is very important to be able to target, you know, not target, sorry, but just focus on the communities that need, you know, more support. I speak Spanish, but there are other communities, you know, that are not Spanish speaking that when they see poetry in their language, I've seen it here in Reno too, at the universities where they have a poem translated in different languages and all of that. It just kind of, like Melissa said, makes people be seen. So having, you know, keep inviting people, not getting discouraged as well, because not everybody feels like they can actually be a poet. If I may say, at least in our community, when people think of poets, they think of, you know, the white writers and all of that. And we have beautiful poetry in Latin America and other countries too. So I just wanted to add that.
I'm gonna hop in if that's okay. I have been thinking a lot deeply. I just want to echo Melissa, Laura. I completely agree that there is some really important work happening in inviting people and witnessing people. And I think something I'm thinking about, I could change my mind about this, but I am currently of the belief that we possibly need to liberate or be generous with the title of writer. I think that I am interested in a world where writer has as much accessibility as someone being a gardener, because both are practices that are incredibly nourishing, and they provide something for the self, they provide something for the community. So when thinking about what we can offer to nourish and facilitate a writing community, I think a lot of it looks like affirming to people that they are writers and that they belong, and that a kitchen table is as good as a college group, is as good as a slam group, is as good as coming and writing in a new language. All of that makes you a writer. And I wonder if people had this accessibility to know this self-knowledge as writer, if there would be more conversation about what it means to be a literary citizen. Because I think good literary citizenship encourages a mutuality of community. That's my thought.
I love that. I think that you touch upon something really important. Like, if you're writing, you're a writer. And people have this idea that like you have to be, again, like I'm gonna go back to the poetry trope or the poet trope that's like Ernest Hemingway, like sitting at a typewriter and bleeding. Like, it's not that. As community organizers, we are not just setting up chairs or generating Zoom links and creating flyers. We are doing that, but we're also unbraiding all these ideas that people come to poetry with. And I think that it's kind of the task of our generation. And I say our generation, I mean the people in the world right now who are making poetry, to soften poetry and to make it more accessible. I guess we're tenderizing it. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, we're kind of unpacking a lot of ideas that exist about poetry. And I think that like your point about making it as accessible as like gardening is beautiful. First of all, like write a book about that. That's amazing. I'm so into that. But yeah, I think that we like in Write Club, when we come together, we do introductions, we say our names, our pronouns, and then just like what you write. And sometimes people are like, I write cover letters because I'm looking for a job right now. I write like I just write things in my journal. And there's someone who comes and she's like, I put stickers in my book. And all of that is part of the writing community because it's the people who are showing up. But yeah, there's the physical stuff that we do, but I think a lot of it is just, like Lisa mentioned, facilitating a vibe, like welcoming people, making sure people know that we have made a container where you can come in, whoever you are, however you are, and be taken seriously as a poet, however you want to be.
This is all so fruitful and generative, I feel. And I love the idea of unbraiding. And I love what Olivia said about liberating the title of writer. I love that. Yeah, I mean, the only way that people can be writers is if they feel like they can be one in the first place. You know, if they feel like that there's not something prohibitive about that. And that I think is the basis of forming that community. This is not a question that I floated to you ahead of time, but I'm going to ask you because I get asked it all the time. And some of you have already spoken through telling your own stories about how you found your poetry communities to this question. But if you were a writer who, who's already self-identified as a writer, and you want to try to find your community, how would you go about it? Let's say you're no longer in college or university. I feel like if you are in a program of study, then you might have avenues for finding a poetry community through that. But what if you aren't? What if you're already done with that, or you haven't started it or whatever? How would you suggest people get started?
I'll jump in. I would say look to your bookstores and your libraries and your coffee shops. Think about the haunts that you would expect to find writers in, and start there. Ask questions. Your barista is basically an oracle of community events. They're usually pretty tapped in. Having conversations, I think, is really the way that you find something that's a good fit for what you're looking for. But bookstores, libraries, organizations like Utah Humanities are invaluable in terms of having access to events that are going on. And then just show up. Honestly, a lot of the time it's just showing up to events, hearing a writer share something and chatting with them afterwards. That's been my experience.
Yeah, and speaking of that too, like I'm a big proponent of online communities. Like a lot of groups and individuals that I've connected with are because we live a lot of our lives are online. And so what I'll do is I'll go on Instagram and I'll look up Salt Lake City poetry, or I'll look up like Utah poets, and lo and behold, eventually the algorithm, once it starts to know you, will start to kind of, recommend writers that are around you. And there are so many individuals and like publications online. And something that I learned really quickly from the slam scene was when I wanted to know who is in my community, I started going through like YouTube and being like, oh, what is around me? Who is from my state? Who is from the surrounding areas? How do I contact them? And there was many a Google form sent when I was like 19 that's like, hi, how do I do this? But you'll be so surprised by how receptive people are, because in the sense that like everyone can and is a writer. This is like going to Olivia's point of like, oh, you're a literary citizen. That doesn't mean that you just have to be a writer. You can participate in whatever ways feels that like nurtures that literary spirit. You know, you can watch, you can support, you can just be a spectator, like whatever feels great. But also in that same sense, like I remember Tanisha Nicole Tyler was my mentor starting out, and something that they said was like everything's a poem. Absolutely everything's a poem. You picked up the mail today, that's a poem. You survived, that's a poem. You wrote a poem, that's a poem. You can have a poem about whatever you want. I have a poem about my boyfriend's butt. I never thought that that would be something that would be considered literary, and here we are. So really expanding that and also being like, can't find anything in person? Online, baby.
And just adding to what Melissa said, and Patrick too, just communities, when you're traveling, if you go visit another place, I did what Melissa did, I Googled local poetry groups, and then that's how I got adopted by Spoken Views Poetry in Reno and by the other collectives here. So being curious about who else is here, and I'm gonna talk a lot about languages just because I'm a language lover, but also trying to find out, at least for me, I try to find other groups that not only write in English and Spanish, but Asian languages, Middle Eastern languages, and just kind of try to go there so that they know that we're not just clustered in one language poetry, but we're also like, hey, we also write poetry. Like we can invite each other to events. Yeah, I'll speak about this real quick. There is that event at the Eccles Theater, which is called Salt Lake Speaks. Melissa knows about this, of course. And we have a lot of poets that, the poets just say their poems in their language. There's no translation or, or spoken language in English. So it also like helps all communities that don't necessarily connect through English, just, know that we all can write and we feel all included with that.
Yeah. And the fact that like it doesn't like it can be in any language and you can intermix, like something that we really emphasize in Plumas. And like sometimes we do I would like to say like voluntelling. So if we have writers that we know are specifically like they have work, we really want to make sure that people understand that like this is a space where if you have multiple threads of your identity, like you can be seen. And so part of that too is also being like, oh, you're working on a poem that has like now what language? Love that. Throw that on the mic. We want to hear it. You're you're a poet that just has written this poem in Mandarin. Perfect. Let's like listen to it all together and then we can all have a conversation about it too. And just really providing like those multiple touch points. Yeah.
I wanna like yes and what Melissa just said because and I think but that part of that is also and I know this is maybe like what is a little cliche, but you also have to just read your poetry everywhere. One of my favorite definitions of poetry is that it's like an offering for the feast, And I think that poetry needs to be in more places, needs to be, a benediction maybe in more events or needs to be a gift on more occasions. And I think the more that people recognize that poetry is something that belongs to whatever is happening, people will come to you and say, I love that. And you can say, thank you. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I think that the chain of events unfolds fairly quickly after that. That's been my experience. But really being brave and saying, yeah, this occasion, this basketball game, maybe let's start it with a poem, or this this collection of friends having brunch, can we start brunch with a poem? I don't know, but just providing some kind of normalcy that poems belong in the world, I think is one way that people feel you know, outside of an institution that they can write too.
We have a terrible joke in like Plumas, but everywhere else, like especially in like the slam scene, is that after anyone says anything, we're like, and is that not survival? And so part of that is like after anything, they're like, oh, I got coffee. And is that not survival? And we just like keep going with that because part of it is like, yeah, let's bring poetry everywhere we are. Everything we do is a poem. We are always writers, but also like, yeah, maybe like I've never heard of it in a basketball game, but like you see poems starting out everywhere else now, you know, like there are in spaces. And also like, listen, we are adults with free will. What we choose to do with it, why not stand in the middle of a park and do poetry? Why not? And do it at Harmon's. I'm sure they'd love it. Write about Brie, and then I'm sure they'd be like, ah, that's a good ad.
And also, what a generous gift. Like, I've never encountered a poem accidentally and thought, like, this guy. I've always thought, like, oh my gosh, how beautiful. What a gift, you know? I think that if we also keep in mind that we're like, I don't know, something that Lisa told me that I think about all the time is poetry is very much a gift economy. And I think about that probably once a day. And how we can gift it and recognize that that has those concrete value culturally for a community.
That is fantastic, you guys. I have a couple of questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to forward them to you right now. But I just want to say, just in terms of the idea of reciprocity, that when you offer a poem, as Olivia said, you know, and as all of you have sort of confirmed, that it also invites other people to give back. And that's the gift economy, right? Is that it's a kind of sharing. And that is one of the ways that you form community around poetry, is through that sharing. Okay, questions from the Q&A. This one is specifically to Laura. What prompted you to start writing poetry after you moved to the United States? Was there a moment or experience that led you in that direction?
Yeah, so I was here when I was gonna turn 14. I was able to start reading English fluently about a year after I moved here. And then I was able to start reading poetry in English first.
Mm.
And then I always tell this story to people, but I went to school in California, so they had this huge like rooms with books that you would rent out and all of that. And there were a bunch of Spanish poetry books in the trash. Like there were so many of them. Yeah, and I was, you know, because I didn't have the connection to my language as much because I was learning English. So I started collecting them and I brought them home. Then I started reading them. And I remember the first book that I read was Pablo Neruda. And it's just the way that he was so melancholic and everything somehow connected with me leaving my country and losing all the friends that I had and trying to adapt to everything. So then I started writing it. I read Romeo and Juliet in high school, and then that's when I started thinking like, oh my gosh, this could be my secret place. This can be a place where I can just be myself, and my parents won't know too, because I used to write in English, so they wouldn't understand what I said too. And yeah, there were secret crushes and all of that. So yeah, so that's what prompted me. The fact that I was able to be exposed to poetry in different languages, and also I needed escape from what I was experiencing because of migration. So writing was like my quiet secret place. That's what, and I prompt everybody to do that because it's healing. And yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. Let me just give the one other question that's hanging out in the Q&A so we address it. This person says, thank you for mentioning libraries, and then asks, do you have recommendations for how existing groups can get the word out about their writing groups?
I will jump on this one. Yeah, you might not like the answer, but social media. It's incredibly easy and infinitely free to share information about your community online. I highly recommend that you just make a flyer with who, what, when, where, why. Like, let's go to classic journalism things. Um, the what, the who of like what your group is about and where you're meeting, and the time. And that the right people will find that, like maybe print it out, include like your Instagram handle or your Facebook group name. But that is a place where I have basically done all of my promotion for my writing group over social media. Um, and you don't have to do it all the time. Like I stopped advertising my writing group because we have now like consistently 10 to 15 people coming every week. And it's like we can't fit them anymore. Like if it grows more, we will not fit it in a way that people have the proper amount of time to share their work and stuff. But I would highly recommend, there's a website called canva.com.
Oh,
I will drop it in the chat right now. It's free. It's like a Photoshop website essentially. Very easy to learn. You may just have to like watch their tutorial or go on YouTube. I know this is not like sexy or deep or anything, but make a flyer, make an Instagram account or a Facebook page or something and just post it there. This also acts as a digital community message board. Like you can say, I have COVID this week, I can't come. Or like, I'm looking for someone else to host this week's group. Can anyone else come? And just giving people a universal reference point for getting their information, for kind of checking in, is really helpful. And it's also something that people can just share. So think of it as like a digital extension of word of mouth.
Yeah, something that I also do is like when I walk into any kind of like public space, I start to see like where my eye is drawn to, and I always check if they have like physical poster boards, right? Because like those always exist anywhere. They exist in doctors' offices, they exist in any kind of community center like rec centers. Go to your local rec center, go to your local library. But also, if you know that there are like groups that have a strong presence in your community, go there and tell them, hey, I'm starting a writing group, or I'm doing this thing. Can you share this with your people? Because lo and behold, like we are people, we contain multitudes. And so that kind of cross communication helps so much, because I know when we were starting Plumas, what we started doing was when we were talking, because a lot of us have like 40 different hats. And so what we started doing was also just talking to our friends and saying, hey, we're starting this thing. We're doing like a kickback at this person's house. Tell your friends. Like you can post it on your story. You can tell whoever, because eventually people have that recognition. And someone's going to be like, oh, I read this book. And they're going to be like, ah, my friend's weird and yells about poems in their backyard. You want to go hang out with them? Like it works.
I mean, okay, now that I'm unmuted. Okay. Um, I'm loving all of these ideas, these terrific generative ideas, including using both digital spaces and physical spaces, recognizing that people go places and see things, but also that they're online and they may find their best points of connections online. And maybe one message I'm hearing is to do some sort of nexus of that, in your practice as you are doing your community work, community building work. Okay, let me ask you this question. What helps to sustain a poetry community? What keeps it going? Some of you I know have been in groups that have been going a long time. So what keeps the thing going?
Letting other people do labor. It is so hard to not always be, especially if you're like Patrick, whenever you run those groups, I'm like, how do you come up with a prompt every week? Like my brain hurts after like 3 weeks of that. Like I can't. But like, part of it is being like, you know what? I'm gonna let like someone else give an idea for a prompt today, and giving opportunities for other people to assist, to participate in other ways. And part of that is like letting go. Like I'm really bad about letting go, like planning of like events. I'm like, I want to know all of the logistics. So sometimes it is better to be like, for my own like resiliency, like, oh no, I am going to let someone else handle these details, but also like giving others the grace that I give myself, or giving myself the grace that I give others. So like, I'm not always going to share the most deep, dark poem that I have written from whatever prompt. I might be like, I'm going to share one line, right? So that way I'm still participating, but I'm not doing like an egregious amount of like emotional labor. But yeah, that's it. Step up, step down. Recognize when you don't have to be in charge of everything and when you can, in fact, be a smooth brains little like person.
I have two thoughts.
I,
Oh, go ahead.
Olivia and I keep crimson. You go ahead this time.
Okay, I'll go this time. We'll take turns. I had two thoughts. My first thought is, ironically, I think in the sustainability game, that you have to sometimes let it burn down and rebuild and change. I think that that's part of it, because I think that one thing that is great about a literary community is the diversity of writers you might encounter, but I also think that's one of the challenges, because there might be someone or a group of someone's who are like, I have a manuscript and I just want to work on that with people, versus people who are like, I want a writing practice and I essentially just need like a spin class for writing where I can show up and we can do a thing together. And both are great and both are right. So letting a letting a gathering have iterations, I think is great and successful for what it's worth. I also think that I think that longevity has come with a reading capacity. Like when people bring books to share and to read, that a group sticks around longer, as opposed to just showing up to write, because they're sort of evaporates this pressure to create a product every time. And instead there's like this exchange of nourishment, and that is something I've seen carry a group for a long time.
I am probably gonna be like the harsh critic here, because of the community that I belong to. So I have noticed, this is pertaining to my experience with Latino writers. The older generations sometimes are not very kind to the younger ones, or even to the new writers. You can't monopolize poetry to be one thing. Everybody can write. It doesn't have to be rhyming. It doesn't have to be classic styles all the time. And if we are trying to help also the Latino community that was born here, it's okay if they don't speak Spanish. Like, we need to be welcoming to that. So older, Hispanic individuals that are trying to do poetry communities, they have to be very understanding and kind. And because I have been part of different communities that the members just keep changing sometimes, or they just don't feel like they belong. And I'm not just talking about young people, I'm talking about older people too, that are not given accessibility to, some of them cannot see very well, some of them don't know how to use an email, And I understand that we are all responsible for ourselves, but it's okay to say like, okay, let's check your email. Like, we'll teach you how to do this, or maybe we can dictate it, or someone else can help. Just being very patient with new writers, being kind, not keeping information too. It's very helpful to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add in here. So what makes a community sustainable? I just really focus on consistency. For me, I had a physical space, and that's where we started meeting. And like, the real reason that I opened a bookstore was so that I could do writing workshops. I really wanted more of like a writing community, and it just so happened that like there was space in my town, and the writing community still exists. So it was really important for me that we had just a consistent place that people knew that their writing was welcomed every single week. So every Tuesday at 6. And what that meant was when I closed my bookstore, I was searching for places in the community to take this community of writers. And immediately I was invited to like 5 or 10 different businesses or community places where people were like, we want you here. Like, not only are you like, I imagine a good community of people, but like you're 5 to 10 people every single Tuesday night on my slowest day of the week, and you'll buy pastries at my coffee shop. Like, we are people. We are like going to benefit the businesses that we go into. So that's one thing, is we found places where we were welcome to meet for free. And that allowed us to have like a specific time that we were going to be somewhere, and people could just rely on us. Like, you don't have to know anyone to come, or you don't have to even write when you come. You can just come and be in the company of people. And I think it creates this beautiful third space experience where you don't have to buy coffee or you don't have to get whatever. You can just come and share space with us. So that's been a huge part of it. And Melissa, I totally hear you. Oftentimes, coming up with the prompt for me is I do it at like 5:57 p.m. and Write Club starts at 6 p.m. But I have a format where like I just find a poem, or throughout the week I'll just be mindful of poems, or even a beautiful recipe, or a passage from a book that I'm reading, and I'll tuck it away and say, there was something about that glimmered for me. And I wanted to share it with this group. And sometimes I won't even have a prompt, and I'll ask them to come with a prompt. But oftentimes a poem that does something for you that like strikes you is gonna have a jumping off point, something that's either scalable or repeatable. Like Joy Sullivan has a poem called Instructions for Traveling West, and I think that's a perfect prompt. Write your own instructions for doing something, but make the instructions totally different from like actually traveling west. Just like there's lots of opportunities for prompts. And I think it's, for me now, I've been doing this weekly for almost 2 years. And it's just kind of a paying attention game at this point. And another thing that makes our community sustaining is our feedback when we get into the feedback section, because we write for a little bit, and then we have an opportunity for folks to share. And we ask for folks to ask for the type of feedback that they want. So is the beginning working for you? I don't have a title and I really need help with the title. Like, we're sometimes going through 15 poets in 45 minutes. So we have a chance for like 30 seconds to 2 minutes of feedback. And so the more specific you can get about what you need from your community, the more specific we can offer you valuable information. So, and also in that, we're never critical without an invitation to be critical. We ensure that we're not coming in here and destroying this beautiful poem that you've worked on when you're not prepped for that. Like, it is mental labor to have someone come into your poem and be like, I don't know why you use the word zigzag. I think that word sucks. Like, we don't do things like that. It's always constructive. It's always celebratory, unless someone says, hey, I've been sitting on this poem for 3 years. Please help me, like, take a wrecking ball to it. So it's always celebratory. I want people to leave feeling better about writing than they came. And then one thing that I'll mention finally, just because this has been really important for me in terms of like maintaining a safe space for people, is having a code of conduct, essentially. And maybe it's not a formal thing that's written out, but it should be. It will help you if you have a formal code of conduct. Because as community organizers, we become responsible for the container that we invite people into. And we are responsible for keeping those people safe and ensuring that, like, if someone is coming in and using hate speech, like, you've got to have something that, like, these are things, like Melissa said, we contain multitudes. Every person contains multitudes. Like, sometimes you might get someone on an off day and they're just not showing up in the way that feels appropriate or something. Like, I've had to ban people from, it was mostly my bookstore, like when I had a physical space, but it's something that I've carried with me into the community existing in other places is like, when you're an organizer, you are responsible for essentially moderating and ensuring that the people that you're inviting to any space are safe. And so I would highly recommend establishing a code of conduct. It could be like hey, these are 5 words that we decide to stick to, like respect, integrity, diversity. Like it can be anything, but like it really helps to have that structure so that when you feel something that's like, oh, that feels like really off, really like not right for our community, you can point to it and say, hey, just want to let you know that that's a violation of our code of conduct, or it doesn't have to be as formal as that, but it can really help you ensure that you essentially have like a compass when something comes up, because that's also not one of the fun parts of a community is like you will have to be navigating any number of people and their personalities and the crazy social landscapes that we're in, and it's just helpful for you to have your own structure. It makes it so you're not sitting there like wondering what to do in a moment. It really pays to be prepared.
We are just about done, and I just want to throw one thing in that I have been thinking about. I'm working with a writing group that on a chapbook of theirs for the Moon and the Rye Press, and they wrote a little foreword to talk about their writing community. And one of the things they said, and this sort of dovetails with what Olivia said about reading, is that they read some texts together to talk about poetic craft. That was their choice, what they wanted to focus on. It could be anything. It could be anything. But the idea of grounding your writerly practice and your community practice in a dialogue with other texts besides the ones that you bring seems to me like a real powerful move and something to consider especially if you're starting a writing community. We had one more question. I'm hoping we can get like quick take responses. Then we'll sign off. You guys ready for it? Are you up? Okay, here it is. This is a question from the Q&A. Can you give advice on all ages events? How do you navigate making an event available for younger people while still being appropriate for an older audience, or vice versa?
Stop starting stuff at 9 p.m. We are tired. I get it. And that's not just because, oh, elders, but like, I think of like people that have kids, right? Like, you need to get your kids in bed before like 8 p.m. But also, like, I know for a fact that sometimes when I'm off work, if something doesn't start immediately after I have that, like, okay, like that hour between work and like dinner, I'm like, oh, what am I gonna do for like 45 minutes? I'm not gonna like stay in Salt Lake City. I'm gonna go home, like where my bed is, you know? So like really being intentional about timing.
Amen to that fully. Earlier events. I am throwing a all ages event next Wednesday, and something I'm doing is I'm splitting it up into 3 different offerings that people can opt in, opt out of. The first hour is a reading hour. I'm bringing all of the poetry books I own, and people can read them and hang out with them and find poems they like. And then the next section, they can stick around or leave. I'm doing a workshop. We're going to do some writing together. And then the third option, stick around or leave. I'm doing an open mic so people can share with some guardrails. But also, I just want to say, I think the thing that makes something all ages effectively is what Patrick said, and that's celebration. I think celebration forward work is really inviting.
Yeah, Olivia's right, because as a mother myself, my kids are not gonna sit in a lecture or a workshop. They need movement. They need creativity with their hands. If you're gonna do an all ages event, maybe the adults have to like create with their hands too and do things like that, that way the children feel included as well, because I think as a society, sometimes children are expected to sit down and listen, but that's not how their development works. So just also being very tolerant of children, parents' time, and not all kids are gonna behave, and maybe parents will need help with that. So yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, kids exist and they're gonna chatter. And how cool is it that they're chattering at your poetry event? And like, it's amazing that families feel welcome to come to events. And also, super simple thing, put all ages on the flyer. Like it can be as simple as that. Like people knowing, oh, this is not just for grown-ups. There may even be other kids there. They may even have an activity or something. If you're doing an activity that has like funding from something, you could even think about like having like coloring, like a coloring table or something, like, you know, making space for all ages, but really just including it in the messaging that everyone is welcome.
Yeah, I think of like my grandmother too. Like she's very much like, okay, but I need to have a very clear outline of what I'm going to because I don't like, she's like, I don't engage in poetry. What do you mean you're gonna sit there and slam? What does that mean? So like, because like she's from Guatemala and and she's from like a very rural part, so it's very different. And so part of it too is also like giving a little bit of an explanation and like as much information as possible too, so people know what to expect. Like I think of my partner has autism, and so it is very helpful to put any kind of information forward because that way I can be like, oh, this is the dress code. Like you don't have to worry about this because some people feel like I encounter it anytime I'm at like theaters or anything, the first thing is like, oh, but am I gonna have like the proper thing to wear? Am I gonna say the right things? Like having as much information possible to make people feel like they can make empowered choices when they go there is so huge.
Thank you all so much. I've been looking forward to this, and my optimism has been amply repaid. I just really so appreciate all of you and your sharing of your wisdom and experience. I just want to encourage the audience to please go to the virtual book fair. Again, check out the writing of these writers, and please, if you will, there's one more panel and 2 more readings tonight. You can still register for them on the Poetry Festival website, utahpoetryfestival.wordpress.com. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you again.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.